The smell hit Grace Thompson like a fist to the stomach. She froze in the 10th floor corridor of Central Mercy Hospital, her small hands clutching the worn stuffed rabbit against her chest, 7 years old. Barely tall enough to see through the rectangular windows of the patient rooms, but she'd recognize that odor anywhere in the world. Sweet, almost like almonds, but wrong, dangerously, horrifyingly wrong. It was the same smell that had filled room 412 6 months ago. In the final days before her father stopped breathing, Grace's sneakers squeaked against the freshly mopped linoleum as she turned toward the source. Room 1201, the presidential suite. Through the partially open door, she could see men and women in white coats moving with controlled urgency, their voices low and tense. "Mom!" Grace tugged at the sleeve of her mother's faded blue cleaning uniform. "Mom, that smell!" Helena Thompson glanced down at her daughter, dark circles under her eyes. From the 11th hour of her shift, she balanced a cleaning cart with one hand while smoothing Grace's hair with the other. "Grace, sweetheart, I need to finish my rounds. You promised to stay quiet in the break room, remember?" "But, Mom, it's the same smell." Grace's voice climbed an octave, echoing down the empty corridor. "Like with Daddy before he—" "Baby, please." Helena knelt, ignoring the pain in her knees that spent 12 hours every day scrubbing floors. She cupped her daughter's face. "I know you miss him. I miss him too. But the doctors said it was his heart, something nobody could predict." Grace shook her head violently, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. I told that nurse with the red glasses that Daddy smelled weird, that something was wrong, and she laughed at me, said I was just a scared kid." Helena's phone buzzed, a text from her supervisor demanding to know why the VIP suites weren't cleaned yet. She sighed, kissed her daughter's forehead, and stood. "Grace, please go back to the break room. I'll be done in 2 hours, and we'll go home and have that frozen lasagna you like." "Okay." Grace watched her mother disappear around the corner, the cart's wheels squeaking on worn axles. Then she turned back to room 1201, where security guards flanked the door and doctors rushed in and out with expressions of barely contained frustration. Something was very, very wrong in there, and Grace knew exactly what inside room 1201. Chaos masqueraded as professional composure. 20 of the country's top physicians crowded around the bed of Ethan Caldwell, the 52-year-old billionaire creator of Caldwell AI medical systems, artificial intelligence technology that had revolutionized diagnostics worldwide. Ironically, all the advanced technology on the planet wasn't saving him now. "Oxygen saturation dropping to 82%, a nurse announced, eyes fixed on the monitor. Dr. Michael Reynolds, chief of the medical team and renowned cardiologist, studied the graphs with mounting frustration. Grey hair disheveled, glasses sliding down his sweaty nose. He looked like he'd aged a decade in the past 48 hours. "It doesn't make sense. Every test comes back normal, heart function stable, brain shows no lesions, kidneys, liver, everything functioning, but he's dying right in front of us, and we don't know why." "What if it's an unknown toxin?" suggested Dr. Patricia Lim, a toxicologist specially brought in from Boston. "We've already tested for 346 different substances," another doctor countered, "all negative." "Has his own medical AI system suggested anything else?" someone asked with poorly disguised sarcasm. Reynolds pressed his lips together. The irony was cruel. The man who created the world's most sophisticated medical artificial intelligence couldn't be saved by it, nor by the best human minds available. On the bed, Ethan Caldwell struggled to breathe through his oxygen mask. His blue eyes, once sharp and calculating, now wandered unfocused across the ceiling. Pale skin, slightly bluish lips, occasional tremors shaking his thin frame. "He has 6 hours. Maybe 8, Reynolds murmured to his colleagues. "If we don't figure out what's causing this—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. On the other side of the bulletproof door, separated only by tempered glass and state-of-the-art security technology, Grace Thompson pressed her face against the side window, observing everything with the intensity of someone who had seen death up close and recognized its signs. She knew, But nobody ever listened to a 7-year-old girl, daughter of a cleaning lady, until there was nobody left to hear. Grace had a plan. It wasn't sophisticated. She was 7 after all, but it was the only one she could imagine. She waited for her mother to disappear down the service stairwell, then walked with determination toward the door of room 1201. An enormous security guard, with the face of someone who dismantled cars with his bare hands, immediately blocked her path. "Kid, you can't be here. I need to talk to the doctor," Grace said, trying to sound adult. "It's important." "Sure it is, sweetheart," he smiled condescendingly, "but the doctors are busy saving a life. How about you go back to where your mom works?" "But I know what's killing the man in there," the guard laughed, a deep sound that made Grace step backward. "Oh, 20 specialist doctors couldn't figure it out. But you, a little kid, know." Grace's cheeks flushed red. It was always like this, always. Adults looked at her and saw only a small girl, irrelevant, invisible, just as they'd looked when she tried to warn them about her father. "Please," her voice trembled, "just let me talk to them, just for a minute. I need to help." "No, sweetheart. Now go back to where you—" "Let her in," the voice came from behind the guard. "Doctor." Michael Reynolds stood in the doorway, observing the scene with an expression Grace couldn't decipher. Exhaustion, certainly, but there was something more. A spark of curiosity, perhaps even desperation. "Dr. Reynolds, sir, she's just a child," the guard protested. "I know who she is." Reynolds adjusted his glasses, studying Grace with renewed interest. "You're Helena's daughter, right? The girl who stays in the break room while her mum works." Grace nodded. Surprised he knew her name. "Your father worked here too, didn't he? Daniel Thompson, night security guard." "He died here," Grace corrected, her voice small but firm. 6 months ago, in room 412. Reynolds frowned. A distant memory surfacing in his mind, he vaguely remembered the case. A 38-year-old man, healthy, who suddenly went into inexplicable respiratory failure. No conclusive diagnosis, sudden heart failure. They'd written on the death certificate, for lack of a better explanation. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, sincere. "But what did you want to tell me?" Grace took a deep breath, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "The smell, the same smell that was in my dad's room, is coming from in there." She pointed to the door of room 1201. "Sweet, like almonds. I warned them when I was with my dad, but nobody believed me. And now he's dead." The corridor fell silent. Reynolds knelt, placing himself at eye level with the girl. "Grace, are you saying you smelled something specific when your father was sick?" "Not sick. Dying?" She didn't look away. "And I smell the same thing now. I know it's the same thing." Something clicked in Reynolds's trained mind. Bitter almond odor. He'd studied this in medical school. Decades ago, it was a classic symptom of cyanide, he murmured, almost to himself. "What?" the guard asked. Reynolds was already standing, gripping Grace's shoulder with gentle but urgent pressure. Grace, this is very important. Are you absolutely certain about this smell? I need you to be very honest with me." "I'm certain." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I'll never forget that smell, never." Reynolds looked at the door to room 1201. Then back at the girl, 20 specialists, hundreds of tests, millions of dollars in technology, and a 7-year-old child had just made the connection they'd all missed. "Come with me," he said. Extending his hand, Grace took it, her small heart racing as they crossed through the door that until seconds ago had seemed an insurmountable barrier between her world and his. The astonishment was immediate. "Michael, what the hell?" Dr. Patricia Lim stared from Reynolds to Grace and back. "You brought a child into the emergency room. She may have discovered what we couldn't." Reynolds was already at the computer, typing rapidly. "Grace, come closer to Mr. Caldwell's bed. Do you smell what you mentioned?" Grace approached timidly, intimidated by the doctors watching her with a mixture of confusion and irritation. But when she got close to the bed, her nose confirmed what her heart already knew. "Yes, it's this, exactly the same." "Michael, this is ridiculous," another doctor began. "Cyanide," Reynolds interrupted, eyes fixed on the screen. "She's describing the characteristic odor of cyanide poisoning. 20 to 40% of people can detect it due to a specific genetic variation." It's possible this child is one of them. The silence that followed was broken only by the constant beeping of monitors. But we tested for cyanide, Dr. Lim said, her voice suddenly less confident. It came back negative. We tested on the standard toxin panel, which detects acute levels. Reynolds was already filling out a new test requisition. But what if it's chronic exposure in low, constant doses? The body metabolizes it quickly. Blood levels might not show anything after a few hours. We need a urinary thiocyanate test and arterial lactate measurement now. The team sprang into action. Samples were collected and sent to the lab with maximum priority. Grace was gently moved to a corner of the room, where a younger nurse with kind eyes offered her chocolate. "You were very brave to speak up," the nurse whispered. "What's your name?" "Grace." "A beautiful name. It means—" "Grace, I know." Grace looked at Ethan Caldwell, unconscious on the bed. "My dad said I was his Grace, the good thing God gave him." The nurse's eyes filled with tears. 23 minutes later, a lab technician burst into the room, holding a printed sheet. "Dr. Reynolds, the results." Reynolds grabbed the paper, his eyes scanning the lines. Then he closed them for a long moment. Breathing deeply, positive, extremely elevated thiocyanate levels, arterial lactate at 8 millimoles per liter. He opened his eyes, looking at Grace with an expression mixing admiration, horror, and gratitude. She was right, Ethan Caldwell is being poisoned with cyanide. The room exploded into controlled movement. Antidote protocols were initiated immediately. Intravenous hydroxycobalamin. Increased oxygen supplementation, intensive monitoring. But amid the medical chaos, Reynolds walked over to Grace and knelt again at her height. "You saved his life, Grace. Really saved it without you. In a few hours, he'd be dead. And my dad—" The question came out so low it was almost lost in the surrounding noise. "If someone had listened to me, would my dad be alive?" The pain on Reynolds' face was genuine. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I'm going to find out, I promise." Then he stood and did something that would change everything. He picked up the phone and called the police, because if Ethan Caldwell was being poisoned, there was a killer in the hospital, and according to Grace, that killer had murdered before. Detective Olivia Hart arrived at Central Mercy Hospital 40 minutes after the call, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers and a forensic team. Tall, broad-shouldered, black hair pulled into a tight bun. She had the intimidating presence of someone who'd spent 20 years unraveling the city's worst crimes. But when Reynolds explained the situation, even she looked surprised. "Let me get this straight," Hart said, consulting her notepad. "A 7-year-old girl, daughter of a cleaning staff member, identified cyanide poisoning that 20 specialist doctors couldn't detect." "Exactly," Reynolds pointed to Grace, who sat in a chair in the corner, legs swinging without reaching the floor. "And she claims her father died the same way 6 months ago, on the 4th floor of this same hospital." Hart approached Grace, her hard face softening only marginally. "Hello, Grace. My name is Olivia. I'm a police detective. Can you tell me exactly what happened to your father?" Grace told her story. She spoke about the final weeks of Daniel Thompson's life, how he began feeling weak, tired, with constant headaches, how he was admitted after fainting during his night shift, how nobody could figure out what was wrong, until one night he simply stopped breathing. "And you smelled this odor?" Hart asked. "I did. Every day when I visited him, I told the nurses, told the doctors, but they said I was imagining things, that it was just the smell of medicines or cleaning products. Do you remember anyone specific taking care of your father? Any nurse or doctor you saw multiple times?" Grace nodded, her eyes lighting up with memory. "There was a nurse. She wore red glasses, really bright ones. I thought they were pretty, so I noticed. She was always there, especially at night, once I arrived by surprise, and she was messing with my dad's IV. When she saw me, she smiled and said she was just adjusting the medication." Hart exchanged a significant look with Reynolds. "Do you know her name? I heard someone call her Nurse Collins, but what? She didn't seem like the other nurses. She talked different, more like how doctors talk, with big, complicated words." Hart wrote rapidly in her notepad. Grace, this is very important. Have you seen this nurse here at the hospital recently? Maybe near this floor. Grace closed her eyes, thinking. Then they widened. Yesterday. I saw her yesterday when I was waiting for my mom. She went into that service elevator that only staff use, still had the red glasses. The room fell into absolute silence. Hart turned to Reynolds, her voice low but urgent. We need to review security footage. Now, and I want a list of everyone who works at this hospital. Doctors, nurses, technicians, support staff, everyone. While police dispersed to begin the investigation, Reynolds led Hart to his office. Where the hospital's surveillance system was accessible, Grace followed them, ignored but present. As always, it took 3 hours of analysis, but they finally found it. 10th floor corridor camera. 2 days earlier, 11:47 p.m., a female figure in a lab coat, distinctive red glasses, entering suite 1201 with a medication cart, stayed for 7 minutes. Left. Can you zoom in on her badge? Hart asked. The security technician zoomed. The name on the badge read, Collins, Lisa, nurse. I need to see employee records, Hart said now. But when HR files were pulled, there was no nurse named Lisa Collins in the system. No login record for that shift. No badge issued with that name. She's using fake credentials, Reynolds murmured. But how does someone get fake hospital badges? They're coded with multiple layers of security. They're not fake, Hart interrupted, studying the screen. Or rather, the badge is real, but the name is wrong. She pointed to a detail everyone had missed. The barcode in the lower corner of the badge was partially visible. Hart called her team at the precinct. Passed along the number. 15 minutes later, the answer arrived. The badge is registered to Dr. Amanda Pierce, anesthesiologist on the day shift. She's worked here for 7 years. Excellent evaluations. No disciplinary record. Where is she now? Hart asked. Reynolds checked the system. She ended her shift 3 hours ago. She's no longer in the building. Hart grabbed her phone immediately. I want an APB issued for Dr. Amanda Pierce. Consider armed and extremely dangerous, and I want a search warrant for her residence yesterday. She hung up, looking at Reynolds. If she has access to cyanide and medical knowledge to administer it in a way that goes undetected, then she killed Grace's father, Reynolds completed, horror evident in his voice, and was about to kill Ethan Caldwell. From the corner of the office, Grace watched everything with eyes far too old for a 7-year-old child. The nurse with the red glasses had a name now, and for the first time, adults were taking her words seriously. But one question remained, echoing in everyone's minds. Why? The answer began to emerge when Hart and her team raided Amanda Pierce's apartment at 4:37 a.m. What they found there transformed an attempted murder case into something much, much worse. Amanda Pierce's apartment was a shrine to obsession. Every wall of the living room was covered with photos. Newspaper clippings, printed documents, all related to a single person, Ethan Caldwell. But it wasn't admiration or fan fascination, it was a detailed map of hatred. My God, Hart murmured, observing what was clearly years of meticulous planning. There were schedules marking Caldwell's daily movements, copies of his medical records, illegally obtained, diagrams of Central Mercy Hospital showing escape routes and camera blind spots, and in the center of everything, enlarged and printed on high-quality photo paper, a picture of a young man in his 20s, smiling shyly at the camera. The face bore a striking resemblance to Amanda's features. Found something, an officer called from the kitchen. In a refrigerated cabinet, hidden behind organic vegetables and healthy smoothies, 20 vials of crystalline solution. Preliminary tests would confirm later potassium cyanide dissolved in saline solution. Prepared for intravenous injection, but it was on Amanda's laptop that the complete story revealed itself. Hart read aloud, her voice growing tenser with each line. March 3rd. Successful test. Patient 412, D. Thompson, Presented progressive symptoms over 14 days. Dosage of 0.5 mg per administration proved ideal to avoid immediate detection. Death occurred as predicted. No suspicion raised. No complete autopsy performed. The room fell silent. Daniel Thompson hadn't died of natural causes. He'd been a guinea pig. Hart continued reading, each entry in the digital diary more disturbing than the last. Amanda had tested her cyanide doses on 7 patients over 8 months. All poor, all with families lacking resources to question diagnoses, all cremated without detailed autopsies. She called them preliminary clinical trials. The ultimate goal was recorded in an entry dated 2 weeks ago. Ethan Caldwell will be the first of my public justices. He destroyed my brother, destroyed his life, his future, his sanity. Because of his greed and arrogance, Jason is dead. Now the world will see the great Ethan Caldwell die the same way, slowly, helplessly, while his elite doctors and precious AI technology completely fail to save him. It will be poetic. It will be justice. Jason Pierce, Hart said, consulting her database. Suicide 3 years ago. Found dead in his apartment after an intentional overdose of pills. What does this have to do with Caldwell? Reynolds asked, who'd insisted on accompanying the search. The answer lay in another folder on the computer. Internal documents from Caldwell AI Medical Systems somehow leaked. Jason Pierce had been a software engineer at the company. He worked on the medical AI system that promised to revolutionize diagnostics. But he discovered a critical problem. The AI was generating alarming false positives in oncology patients, diagnosing cancer where there was none. He reported it to quality control, then to supervisors. Finally, directly to Ethan Caldwell. The response came as termination for unsatisfactory performance and a letter threatening legal action if he publicly defamed the company 3 months later. The AI was launched to market with the defect still present. 8 months after that, Jason Pierce was found dead. Amanda blames Caldwell for her brother's death, Hart concluded, and she's partially right. He covered up serious flaws to protect his profits. But that doesn't justify— Of course it doesn't justify, Hart cut in, but it explains, and it gives us a bigger problem. She pointed to the last section of Amanda's diary. A detailed plan for what she called Phase 2. After killing Caldwell, Amanda planned a mass chemical attack at the Caldwell AI Medical Systems annual gala, an event that would gather 400 executives, investors, and high-level employees. The plan involved contaminating the ventilation system with a cyanide gas bomb. The gala date, 3 days away. "We need to find her," Hart said, panic barely controlled in her voice. "She's not just a murderer, she's a terrorist." The net closed quickly, but Amanda Pierce seemed to have vanished. Her phone was off, credit cards inactive, no car registered in her name used in the last 24 hours. She'd simply evaporated meanwhile. At Central Mercy Hospital, Ethan Caldwell fought between life and death. The antidote treatment had begun in time, but the damage from days of slow poisoning was severe. He remained unconscious, connected to a network of machines that breathed for him, pumped blood for him, lived for him. Grace returned to the hospital the next day with her mother, who was still processing the revelation that her daughter had solved a medical mystery that had baffled the country's best specialists. "My baby is a hero," Helena repeated, hugging Grace so tightly the girl could barely breathe. But Grace didn't feel like a hero. She felt empty, because now she knew the truth about her father's death. He hadn't died of natural causes. It hadn't been God's will, as the pastor said at the funeral. It hadn't been an inevitable medical failure. As the doctors suggested, he'd been murdered, used as a guinea pig to test poison, discarded like trash because he was poor, because he had no powerful family to ask difficult questions, because he was invisible, like her. "Can I be alone for a little bit?" Grace asked, her voice very small. Helena hesitated, but saw something in her daughter's face that made her nod. "I'll be in the cafeteria. Come find me when you want, okay?" Grace nodded, waited for her mother to leave, then walked slowly to the room where her father had died. Room 412, now occupied by another patient, another body fighting another illness. She stood at the door, silent tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "Sorry I couldn't save you. Sorry I didn't scream louder, didn't force them to listen to me. Sorry. Grace?" She turned. Dr. Reynolds was there, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate from the cafeteria. "Thought you might need this," he said. Offering one, Grace took it but didn't drink, just held it, letting the warmth heat her cold hands. "It's not your fault," Reynolds said gently. "You tried to warn them. You did everything a child could do. The fault is ours, the adults who should have listened. But if I'd insisted more, then you would have been labeled a problem child and probably banned from visiting your father." Reynolds' voice was firm but gentle. "The system failed you, Grace, and your father, but you didn't fail anyone. The man in there, Mr. Caldwell, will he be okay?" Reynolds nodded. "Thanks to you, yes, he'll be okay. The doctors think he'll wake up in a day or 2. He'll have a long recovery process, but he'll survive. And my dad won't." There was nothing Reynolds could say to that, so he simply stood there in silent solidarity while Grace cried. 2 days passed with no sign of Amanda Pierce. Then on the morning of the 3rd day, exactly 24 hours before the planned Caldwell AI Gala, she made a mistake. She used her debit card at a pharmacy. Once. A single $15 transaction. But it was enough. Hart and her tactical team surrounded the cheap motel 3 blocks from the pharmacy. Tactical armor, weapons drawn, hostage negotiators on standby. "Dr. Pierce!" Hart shouted through the megaphone. "We know you're in there. Come out with your hands visible." Silence. Then the door to room 7 opened slowly. Amanda Pierce emerged, but her hands weren't raised. She was holding a backpack against her chest. "One step closer and I detonate," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Cyanide gas, enough to kill everyone within a 50-meter radius." The officers froze. Hart stepped forward, alone, hands raised. "Amanda, let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about." Amanda's eyes, behind the red glasses that now seemed sinister rather than stylish, were empty. "My brother is dead. Ethan Caldwell stole his life, his dignity, his future, and nobody cared. Nobody brought justice." "Then do it the right way," Hart argued. "Testify against him. With the evidence we have, Caldwell will answer for his mistakes." Amanda laughed. "A joyless sound. Answer. He has billions of dollars and battalions of lawyers. Men like him never answer for anything. They buy the justice they want." "And the 7 people you killed?" Hart's voice grew harder. "Daniel Thompson, was he also a billionaire with lawyers? Or was he just a working father trying to support his family?" For the first time, something broke in Amanda's expression. "They were necessary to perfect the dosage, to ensure that when the time came, they had names, families, children who will miss them forever." Hart took another step. "Grace Thompson is 7 years old. Amanda, she watched her father die, smelled the poison you used, and she'll carry that for the rest of her life because you decided his life was worth less than your revenge." Amanda's hands trembled. I didn't think of them as people," Hart completed. "I know you thought of them as tests, experiments, means to an end, exactly like Ethan Caldwell thought of his customers, profits instead of people. I'm not like him." "No." Hart was now just 5 meters away. "Then prove it. Drop the backpack. Let me help you do this the right way." For a long moment, Amanda Pierce stood motionless, tears streaming behind the red glasses. Then, slowly, she lowered the backpack. The tactical team moved immediately, immobilizing her on the ground, removing the backpack and evacuating the area. The bomb, they confirmed later, was real, and it was armed, if Amanda had pressed the detonator. 43 people, officers, motel guests, workers in the area, would have died as Amanda Pierce was taken handcuffed to a squad car. She screamed one last thing, her voice breaking. Jason deserved justice. He deserved someone to care. Hart stopped, turned. "You're right," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He did, but not this way. Never this way." Amanda was taken away, and Hart returned to her team. Exhausted but relieved, a disaster had been averted. But for 7 families, including Grace Thompson's, justice had come too late. Ethan Caldwell woke 3 days after Amanda Pierce's arrest. His first sight was of tubes, machines, and a white hospital ceiling. His first sensation was pain, a deep, penetrating pain that seemed to come from every cell in his body. His first question, hoarse through a throat damaged by intubation. "What happened?" Dr. Reynolds, who'd maintained constant vigil, explained everything. The poisoning, the investigation, the 7 dead patients, and Grace, a 7-year-old girl, Ethan repeated, his voice barely more than a whisper. "A child discovered what my own medical technology couldn't." "It wasn't technology that saved you," Reynolds corrected. "It was empathy, observation, memory, and the courage to speak, even when nobody was listening." Ethan closed his eyes, tears escaping from the corners. "Jason Pierce," he murmured. "He came to me, tried to warn me about the AI problems, and I crushed him, protected my profits, my reputation, and now 7 people are dead because his sister sought revenge in the worst possible way," Reynolds completed. "But Ethan, you have a choice now. You can spend the rest of your life lamenting, or you can do something meaningful with the time Grace Thompson gave back to you." It was that conversation that planted the seed. While Ethan recovered physically, Grace struggled with her own invisible battles. She didn't sleep well. Nightmares woke her screaming, dreams where her father called for her, where she ran through hospital corridors but never arrived in time, where the smell of bitter almonds filled her lungs until she couldn't breathe. Helena took her to a child therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, who had a small but welcoming office filled with colorful pillows and drawings from other children on the walls. "Grace," Dr. Kim said during their 3rd session, "you know it wasn't your fault, right? What happened to your father wasn't because you didn't do enough." Grace looked at her shoes. "But I could have screamed, could have made them listen to me. You did everything you could. You were a 6-year-old child trying to make powerful adults change their minds. That would be difficult even for an adult. But now," Grace raised her eyes, "and there was something fierce in them. I saved Mr. Caldwell, so why do I still feel so empty?" Dr. Kim leaned forward. "Because you're carrying 2 weights, Grace. The pain of losing your father, and the guilt of saving someone else when you couldn't save him. But those feelings don't make sense together, do they?" Grace shook her head. "Shouldn't I be happy that I saved someone?" "You can be happy and sad at the same time," the therapist explained. "You can be proud of doing the right thing and still be grieving the person you lost. Feelings aren't simple, especially the big ones." It was the first thing that made sense to Grace in weeks. At the hospital, Daniel Thompson's absence was being felt in ways nobody expected. The night security guards commented on how the basement corridor seemed darker, less safe. Without Daniel's reassuring presence, the night shift nurses mentioned missing his rounds. How Daniel always stopped by to check if they were okay, if they needed fresh coffee, if there was anything suspicious in the parking lots, and the regular patients, those with chronic illnesses who spent more nights at the hospital than at home, asked about Daniel's light, the way he always carried a small flashlight and made animal shadows on the walls to make children laugh. Helena compiled these stories in a notebook, tears staining the pages as she wrote each shared memory. Daniel Thompson had been invisible to the medical system, but to the people who worked under the fluorescent lights and between sterile walls. He'd been essential, and now he was gone, Saturday afternoon, exactly 18 hours before the planned Caldwell AI Medical Systems Gala. Tension at the police station was palpable. Hart stood in a makeshift operations room at Central Mercy Hospital itself, installed in a 4th-floor conference room, surrounded by whiteboards covered with photos, timelines, maps. A team of 12 investigators worked 24-hour shifts. The FBI had sent 2 agents specialized in domestic terrorism. Agent Thomas Keller, 45, a veteran of extremism cases, and Agent Sarah Mendez, 32, a psychological profiling expert, presented Amanda's profile. 35-year-old woman, highly qualified anesthesiologist. No prior criminal history, consistently excellent performance reviews, significant unprocessed trauma related to her brother's suicide 3 years ago. Keller added tactical analysis. She has medical training, which means familiarity with security protocols, hospital ventilation systems, chemical substances. She has access to uniforms and credentials. She knows shifts, movement patterns, vulnerable points. She's an extremely dangerous adversary because she understands the system from the inside. Hart reviewed the evidence. No cell phone use, probably destroyed. No financial transactions, using cash. Car not located, may have switched plates or abandoned it. No appearances on traffic or public security cameras. She's behaving like someone on a final suicide mission, Hart concluded. Either she'll try the attack at the gala despite our discovery, or what? Marco asked. Or she's already decided the mission failed and is planning to exit on her own terms. Meanwhile, Grand Hotel Millennium security team was on maximum alert. The event wasn't cancelled. A controversial decision by the Caldwell AI board, against police recommendation, but was moved to a smaller ballroom with reduced capacity, 150 people instead of 400, metal detectors installed, sniffer dogs trained for chemicals, tactical team disguised among waiters and staff. Caldwell, now awake and responding to treatment, insisted on attending. If I hide, she wins. Jason Pierce deserves to be publicly honored, and I'm going to do that. Reynolds tried to dissuade him. But Caldwell was stubborn. Meanwhile, Grace was in therapy with Dr. Sarah Kim, her 5th session in 2 weeks. Unusual intensity, but extraordinary circumstances required aggressive intervention. Sarah used narrative therapy techniques. Asking Grace to draw how she felt, Grace drew 3 figures, herself small in the corner, a giant with red glasses in the center, Amanda, and a lying figure with closed eyes, her father, between her and the giant. She wrote one word, late. Tell me about this drawing, Sarah invited. I was too late for Daddy, but I got there in time for the rich man, and it's not fair. Sarah validated the feeling. You're absolutely right. Grace, it's not fair, and it's normal to feel angry about that. But everyone keeps saying I'm a hero. How can I be a hero if I let my dad die? You didn't let your father die. Adults let him die when they didn't listen to you. You saved Mr. Caldwell because this time one adult finally listened. Both of those things can be true at the same time. Grace absorbed this, then asked something that had been tormenting her. The woman who killed my dad. Was she right, like, her brother was treated badly by the rich man's company, so she was avenging him? Sarah chose her words carefully. Amanda's pain was real. The injustice her brother suffered was real. But killing innocent people like your father isn't revenge. It's transferring pain to other people who had nothing to do with what happened to Jason. Your father didn't hurt anyone, but he paid the price for the anger Amanda felt towards someone else. So she's like victim and villain at the same time? Human beings are complicated, Grace. Amanda suffered something terrible, and then she made terrible choices in response. Both things are true. You can have compassion for her pain and still be angry about the choices she made. The concept was advanced for a 7-year-old. But Grace was being forced to grow up too fast. Sarah saw it in the eyes that were too old, the posture that was too tense. The nightmares Helena reported. Grace woke screaming 3 to 4 times a week. The session ended with Sarah teaching a grounding technique. When Grace felt panic coming, she should touch 5 things she could see, 4 she could feel, 3 she could hear, 2 she could smell, 1 she could taste. It brought the mind back to the present, instead of trapped in traumatic memories. Grace practiced right there, saw purple pillows, wooden table, photo of a dog on the wall, window with white curtain, succulent plant, felt softness of the pillow, texture of her jeans, crayon in her hand, fresh air from the fan, heard Sarah's voice, cars on the street, clock ticking, smelled lavender, diffuser in the corner, and coffee that Helena had brought from the cafeteria. Tasted residual chocolate she'd eaten on the way. Very good, Sarah praised. Practice this every time you feel the smell of bitter almonds coming back in your mind. But the smell wasn't just in Grace's mind. It was about to become real again, because at that exact moment, Amanda Pierce sat 3 blocks from the Grand Hotel Millennium in a stolen car with switched plates, with a backpack on the passenger seat containing a homemade cyanide gas bomb. Watching the security team do sweeps, she knew she was surrounded, knew she'd probably die in the next few hours. But Jason deserved justice. And if she couldn't kill 400, at least she'd try to take as many as she could. On the radio, news announced, Caldwell AI Gala will take place tonight despite terrorist threats. CEO Ethan Caldwell, recently recovered from an assassination attempt, insists on attending to honor former employee Jason Pierce. Amanda smiled without joy. Caldwell was coming to her. Perfect. She checked the bomb, timer adjusted, remote detonator as backup, gas disperser positioned, then waited for darkness. The hunt was coming to an end. 7:47 p.m. Saturday. The sun beginning to set over the city. The Grand Hotel Millennium was illuminated. Red carpet extended at the entrance. Valets parking executives' cars. The gala would begin at 8:30 p.m. Hart was in a mobile command van parked 2 blocks away, monitoring feeds from 15 security cameras installed in and around the hotel, tactical team positioned, 6 elite snipers in adjacent buildings, 12 disguised officers inside the event, 20 uniformed police in external perimeter. Keller, the FBI agent, questioned the decision not to cancel again. If she manages to get inside, then we'll catch her there, Hart interrupted. Caldwell insisted. The board agreed. Our mission now is to ensure nobody dies. At 8:05 p.m., Caldwell arrived in an armored limousine, rented especially for the occasion, still visibly weak but determined. Reynolds accompanied him as personal physician, against all professional instinct. Private security flanked both to the entrance. Grace and Helena watched live coverage on TV in their apartment. Helena murmured, "This is crazy. He should be home, recovering." "He feels guilty," Grace observed with surprising perception. "Like, if he doesn't go, it means he's afraid, and then the woman wins even though she's in jail, but she's not in jail." "How do you know?" "Because if she were in jail, they wouldn't need all those police." Helena looked at her daughter. Constantly surprised by reasoning beyond her years, trauma had forced Grace to grow up too fast. Inside the hotel, the event began formally. The smaller ballroom was elegantly decorated, round tables with floral centerpieces, open bar at the back, small stage with podium and screen for presentations, 150 guests, reduced from the original 400, circulated doing uncomfortable networking. Everyone knew about the threat, but the appearance of normalcy was maintained. Caldwell took the stage at 8:52 p.m. Microphone feedback made people flinch. He spoke with a voice still hoarse from intubation. "Good evening. I know the circumstances of this gala are unconventional. I know many of you are here against better judgment. I appreciate your courage." Pause, heavy breathing. "I'm here today to do something I should have done 3 years ago. Publicly apologize and pay tribute to Jason Pierce." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. The board of directors, seated at the front table, exchanged uncomfortable glances. Caldwell continued, "Jason was a brilliant engineer who worked on our medical AI system. He identified critical flaws that could, and probably did cause, harm to patients. He reported these flaws repeatedly through appropriate channels, and I, protecting profits and launch schedule, ignored his warnings. Worse, I fired him and threatened him legally to silence him. Absolute silence now. Jason Pierce took his own life 3 months after termination. I didn't pull the trigger, but I created the circumstances that led him there. I robbed him of career, dignity, purpose, and I never apologized. Never admitted the mistake until now." The screen behind him lit up, showing a photo of Jason, the same one Amanda had in her apartment, a smiling young man, full of life. Jason deserved better, deserved to be heard, deserved a company that valued ethics over greed, and today I announce that Caldwell AI Medical Systems is being permanently closed. The technology will be donated to public universities for non-commercial research. Remaining profits will fund a foundation dedicated to... An explosion of breaking glass interrupted the speech. The west window of the ballroom shattered. A metal object rolled across the floor. A cylinder the size of a fire extinguisher. Valves releasing gas with a loud hiss. Instant chaos. People screamed, ran for exits. Disguised officers revealed themselves. Weapons drawn. Keller shouted into the radio, "Gas deployed! Evacuate immediately!" Hart was already running from the command van toward the hotel. The tactical team burst through all entrances, but the gas spread fast. White cloud filling the ballroom, people coughing, stumbling. Outside, Amanda stood on the roof of the adjacent building. She'd climbed the fire escape, holding the remote detonator. The plan was to wait until more people were affected by the gas, then detonate a secondary explosive charge to ensure maximum lethality. But something made her hesitate. Through the broken window, she saw Caldwell on stage. Stumbling but not running, saw Reynolds trying to pull him, heard fragments of the speech through the chaos. Jason deserved better. I failed. Caldwell was apologizing publicly, closing the company. Admitting guilt, exactly what Jason had begged him to do years ago. Amanda's hand trembled over the detonator. The rage that had sustained her for 3 years suddenly seemed hollow. She was going to kill 150 people, many who had nothing to do with Jason, to make Caldwell pay. But he was already paying. He was sacrificing his billion-dollar empire, reputation, legacy. It wasn't enough, would never be enough to compensate for Jason's loss. But it was something. Tears streamed behind the red glasses. Amanda realized a devastating truth. Revenge didn't bring Jason back. Killing Caldwell didn't bring Jason back. Massacring a room of executives didn't bring Jason back. She'd killed 7 innocent people, testing her poison. Was going to kill 150 more. And for what? Jason would still be dead. She would still be empty, just more blood on hands that would never be clean. A sniper located her. Red laser dot appeared on her chest. Amanda slowly lowered the detonator, placed it on the ground, raised her hands over the radio. The tactical commander shouted, "Target surrendered! Hold fire! Hold fire!" The tactical team surrounded her in seconds, threw her to the ground, handcuffed her. The bomb was disarmed. Technician Rogerio worked with trembling hands, cut the blue wire. Timer stopped at 0047. Below, in the ballroom, a hazmat team, hazardous materials, entered with masks. Determined the gas was a cyanide mixture in non-lethal concentration, enough to cause symptoms like dizziness, nausea, coughing, but not immediate deaths. Windows were opened, industrial fans brought in. Complete evacuation of the building miraculously. Nobody died. 17 people treated for mild exposure. 3 hospitalized for observation, including Caldwell, whose already compromised oxygen saturation was affected. All released within 24 hours. Amanda was taken handcuffed to a squad car. Hart intercepted her on the stairs, asked directly, "Why didn't you detonate? You had the detonator in your hand." Amanda looked at her with empty eyes. "Because I realized Jason would be ashamed of me. He was kind, ethical, believed in doing the right thing even when difficult, and I became a monster, exactly the kind of person he fought against." "Then why not surrender before killing 7 people?" The question pierced Amanda's last defenses. She collapsed, sobbing. "Because I was so lost in pain, I forgot who Jason really was. I only remembered the anger, the injustice. I forgot he would have me choose compassion, not revenge." Hart offered no absolution, only truth. 7 families will never have their people back because you forgot. Grace Thompson will never have her father back. Your good intentions don't erase that. I know, and I'll carry it for the rest of my life. No. You'll carry it for the rest of your life in prison, and even that is more than Daniel Thompson, Maria Rodriguez, and 5 others got. Amanda was pushed into the squad car. Hart watched the car drive away. Sirens echoing into the night. Keller approached. "We got her. Attack prevented. Why do you look dissatisfied?" "Because it's still too late for 8 people. A victory that comes after bodies pile up isn't really a victory." In the apartment, Grace watched the arrest live on TV. Helena asked, "How do you feel?" Grace thought for a long moment. "Relieved she didn't kill more people, but still angry she killed my dad. Can I feel both things?" "Yes." "My love, you can feel all the things." Sunday morning, 3 days after the thwarted Gala attack, Caldwell was hospitalized again, this time as a precaution due to gas exposure, but conscious and fully lucid for the first time since the initial poisoning 2 weeks ago. Reynolds entered room 1201 at 8:23 a.m., carrying a tablet with complete case records. It was time for Caldwell to face the entire truth without filters. "Are you ready to hear everything?" Reynolds asked. "Yes, I need to know exactly how many lives my greed cost," so Reynolds told him. He began with Jason Pierce, brilliant engineer hired 4 years ago, exceptional work, identification of critical flaws in the AI system. 3 formal attempts to report problems, summary dismissal, downward spiral of depression, suicide 3 months later. He showed emails Amanda had saved. Caldwell read his own words, written years ago. Cold. Threatening. Prioritizing corporate protection over patient safety. Tears streamed. As he read, Reynolds continued. Amanda Pierce, Jason's sister, also a medical professional, devastated by her brother's loss. Developing vengeful obsession over 3 years, meticulous planning, selection of victims for tests, 7 poor patients over 8 months. He showed photos of the victims on the tablet. Daniel Thompson, 38, security guard, wife and daughter, Maria Rodriguez, 52, house cleaner, 3 children, James Chen, 45, bus driver, retirement in 2 years, Angela Santos, 31. Waitress, 6 months pregnant, Luis Martins, 67, gardener, 8 grandchildren, Roberto Neves, 41, mechanic, caring for mother with Alzheimer's, Teresa Fernandez, 29, elementary teacher, fiancé planning wedding, 7 people, Reynolds said firmly, 7 complete, complex, valuable lives, all murdered to perfect the poison dosage meant for you, all chosen because they were poor. Marginalized, easily ignored by the medical system. Caldwell vomited in a basin beside the bed. Reynolds didn't relent. Truth should hurt. And Grace Thompson, 7 years old, tried to save her father. Literally warned about poisoning, was ignored because she's a poor child. Her father died. She carries guilt she should never carry. "I need to meet her," Caldwell murmured. "Not yet." "First, you need to fully understand your role in this." Reynolds explained the causal chain. Caldwell's corporate decisions led to Jason's unjust firing, which led to suicide, which led to Amanda's trauma, which led to vengeful obsession, which led to 7 murders in tests, which led to attempt to murder Caldwell, which led to attempt at mass massacre. "You didn't inject cyanide into anyone," Reynolds said. "But you created an ecosystem of greed and silencing that resulted in 9 deaths, including Jason. That's responsibility you have to carry." Caldwell didn't defend his actions, didn't try to minimize, just absorbed with growing horror, finally asked, "What do I do now? How do I compensate for this?" "You don't compensate, you never will, but you can do something meaningful with the time Grace gave back to you." They discussed next steps. Caldwell had already announced the closing of Caldwell AI, a decision that destroyed stock value but was morally necessary. Now he proposed creating a foundation dedicated to 3 missions. 1. Train medical professionals to listen to patients and families, especially children without class or age bias. 2. Full scholarships for low-income youth to study medicine or nursing. 3. Advocacy for reforms in hospital protocols to investigate unconventional suspicions. Proposed name, Caldwell Thompson Foundation. Half the name honoring Daniel Thompson, first victim of Amanda's tests. Grace's father, Reynolds, approved, but added a condition. Grace needs to have a voice in the foundation, not just as a symbol, but as an active participant. If we're going to teach doctors to listen to children, a real child must be at the table making decisions. Caldwell agreed immediately. He proposed a title, Child Health Advocate. Grace would be a spokesperson traveling to hospitals, medical schools, conferences, sharing her story and teaching professionals about the importance of active listening. Meanwhile, in the Thompson apartment, Grace was in another therapy session. Dr. Sarah now made home visits due to media intensity around the case. They worked on processing survivors' guilt. Sarah used an externalization technique, asked Grace to draw guilt as a character separate from her. Grace drew a grey monster with claws, empty eyes, mouth open in a silent scream. "How does this monster talk to you?" Sarah asked. "Says I didn't do enough, that if I'd screamed more, fought more, refused to leave Daddy's room, he'd be alive. And what would you say to this monster if you could answer?" Grace thought for a long moment. Then with a firm voice, "I'd say I was 6 years old, that I did everything a 6-year-old child could do, that adults with power and education failed, not me." "Exactly," Sarah smiled with genuine pride. "You're starting to integrate that." But nightmares continued. Helena reported Grace woke screaming 4 to 5 times a week, always the same sequence, running through endless corridors, smell of almonds suffocating, arriving at her father's room only to find him dead. Woman in red glasses laughing, Sarah prescribed a nightmare rewriting technique. Before sleeping, Grace should visualize the nightmare but change the ending. Instead of arriving late, she arrives in time. Instead of finding her father dead, she finds him waking. Instead of the killer laughing, she finds the killer being taken away by police. The mind doesn't distinguish well between real memory and intense visualization, Sarah explained to Helena. Rewriting trauma repeatedly can help the brain process in less destructive ways. Camilla visited, bringing a package. Hospital staff had done a collection, created a memory album about Daniel. Each page had a different photo or story contributed by colleagues. Helena and Grace leafed through together, crying and laughing simultaneously. There was a photo of Daniel dressed as Santa at the hospital Christmas party, a story about the time he stayed an extra hour to help a new nurse find lost files. A drawing a hospitalized child made of him as guard superhero with a cape and everything. "He was loved," Camilla said softly. "Maybe the system didn't value him, but people did." Grace hugged the album against her chest. It was the first piece of genuine comfort she'd felt in weeks. Physical proof that her father mattered, that his life had meaning, that he didn't die invisible to everyone, only to power structures. That night, for the first time in 2 weeks, Grace slept without nightmares. She dreamed of her father making animal shadows on heaven's walls, making angel children laugh. She woke crying, but it was different crying, not despair, but longing mixed with something like peace. Reynolds called Helena a Monday morning. "Caldwell would like to meet Grace when she's ready. No pressure," Helena asked her daughter. Grace considered for a long time. Then, "Okay. He didn't kill my dad, he just created the situation that led to it, and now he's trying to fix it, I think." The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday, 10:30 a.m., a small conference room on the 6th floor of Central Mercy Hospital, chosen for being neutral. Not a hospital room, too clinical, not an office, too formal, just a quiet space with a round table, comfortable chairs, window overlooking the internal garden. Grace entered, holding Helena's hand with a force that left fingers white. She wore a navy blue dress Helena had saved 3 months to buy, hair pulled back with a clip that had belonged to her grandmother, black shoes slightly tight, feet had grown but a new pair needed to wait for next paycheck. Ethan Caldwell sat in a wheelchair, still too weak to stand for long periods. He'd lost 10 kilos, face pale, deep circles under eyes, but eyes clear and focused. He wore hospital clothing still, not an executive suit, forced but real humility. Reynolds was present as mediator, Camilla too, as emotional support for Grace. The initial moment was tense. Grace looked at Caldwell, the man who'd almost died, the man whose greed had indirectly killed her father, the man who now wanted to make amends. She didn't know how to feel, so she felt nothing, just observed. Caldwell spoke first, voice hoarse from disuse. "Grace, thank you for agreeing to see me. I know you have no obligation to be here." Silence. Grace didn't respond. "I heard everything you did. Heard you tried to save your father. Heard you saved me when 20 specialist doctors failed. Heard about the price you paid for having perception that adults ignored. Paused to breathe. Still tired easily. There's nothing I can say or do that will bring your father back. There's no excuse that erases the fact that my greedy decisions created the chain of events that led to his death. But I can make a promise." He took a folder from his lap, hands trembling slightly. Residual neurological damage from poisoning. Opened it. Showed official documents already signed and notarized. "I'm permanently closing Caldwell AI Medical Systems. The technology has fundamental flaws that prioritized profit over accuracy. It'll take years to correct, and I won't put more lives at risk meanwhile." Helena gasped. She'd seen it on the news, but hearing it in person hit differently. "In its place, I created the Caldwell-Thompson Foundation." He pointed to the name on the documentation. Thompson in large letters. "Dedicated to training doctors and healthcare professionals to listen to patients and families, especially children, because I never want another child to have to scream to be heard when a life is at stake." Grace finally spoke, voice small but clear. "Why Thompson? Why my father's name? Because he was the first victim in the revenge chain my greed created. Because he deserves to be remembered not as a statistic, but as the good man who loved his daughter and made night hospital shifts seem less lonely." The first tear rolled down Grace's face. Caldwell continued, handing a second set of documents to Helena. "I also created the Daniel Thompson Scholarship for young people from low-income families who dream of studying medicine or nursing. Full funding, tuition, books, housing, everything. The first class will have 10 scholars. Will grow to 50 in 5 years. Helena cried openly now. Grace kept eyes fixed on Caldwell, processing. "And Grace," he leaned forward, looking directly at her, "I'd like to name you as the first child health advocate of the Foundation. Your voice, your observations, your story will be shared with doctors across the country. You'll travel to hospitals, medical schools, conferences. You'll teach adults to listen. Transform your father's death into something that saves other lives." Long silence. Grace looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly, looked at Reynolds, who smiled gently, looked back at Caldwell. "Will my dad be proud?" Voice broke on the question. Caldwell smiled through his own tears. "Your dad is proud. Grace, wherever he is, he's applauding, and I'm honored to meet the girl he raised to be so brave, compassionate, and attentive to the world." Grace considered for a long moment. Then, "Okay, I accept. But only if you promise one thing, anything, that you'll never again ignore when a child says something's wrong, even if it seems impossible, even if adults think they know more, even if the child is poor or different or small. And promise." Caldwell extended his hand, a formal gesture, businesslike but loaded with meaning. "I promise." Grace looked at the extended hand, the hand of a man whose greed had indirectly killed her father, but also the hand of a man who was trying, genuinely trying, to fix things, to transform tragedy into purpose. She extended her own hand, so small it disappeared in his when they shook. The agreement was sealed. It wasn't forgiveness. Forgiveness would take years, might never come completely, but it was a beginning. It was recognition that transformation was possible. It was a choice to use pain to create change instead of just carrying bitterness. Helena hugged her daughter, sobbing. Camilla wiped her own eyes. Reynolds signed as witness on the Foundation documents. Caldwell observed everything and felt the weight in his chest lighten marginally. Not absolution, but purpose. The time Grace had given back to him would have meaning now. After signatures and logistical explanations, the meeting ended. Grace and Helena stood to leave when Grace turned back. Approached Caldwell's wheelchair again. "Mr. Caldwell." "Yes, Grace. I'm still angry at you. I'll probably be angry for a long time. You have every right. But thank you for trying to fix it. My dad always said a good person isn't someone who never makes mistakes. It's someone who admits mistakes and works to do differently." Caldwell closed his eyes, absorbing the words. When he opened them, they were moist. "Your father was a wise man. He was the best." Grace left, leaving Caldwell alone with Reynolds. "You did the right thing," Reynolds said. "No, I'm doing the least wrong thing possible considering the horror I caused." "It's not the same thing." "Maybe not, but it's something." And in that small room, in the hospital where everything began, something new was born from tragedy's ashes. Not complete redemption, but genuine commitment to change. Daniel Thompson couldn't be brought back, but his legacy, through his brave daughter and the foundation bearing his name, would save countless future lives. It was cruel irony, but it was also hope. 6 months later, Criminal Justice Court, Room 4B, September, the trial of Dr. Amanda Pierce, officially State versus Pierce, but the whole city called it the Hospital Angel of Death case. Formal charges: 7 counts of first-degree murder, premeditated with extreme cruelty, 1 count of attempted murder. Caldwell, 1 count of domestic terrorism, the Gala attack, multiple counts of illegal possession of controlled substances. The prosecution led by James Morrison, 51 veteran prosecutor with a 94% conviction rate. Defense led by Karen Delgado, 38, brilliant and aggressive public defender known for finding impossible angles. Jury of 12, 6 women, 6 men, ages 24 to 67, mixed races and backgrounds, all had passed through rigorous selection to ensure impartiality. Difficult since the case was massively covered. Media filled the back of the room. TV, radio, newspaper, blog reporters. Families of the 7 victims occupied the first 2 rows on the left side. Helena and Grace, now 8, sat in the front row on the right side. Amanda entered handcuffed, wearing orange inmate clothing, red glasses confiscated and replaced with simple brown frames. She'd lost weight, grey hair showing in the roots, posture hunched, a shadow of the confident professional she'd been. Judge Marcus Tavares, 59, black veteran of complex cases, banged his gavel. "Court is in session. State versus Pierce, case number 2024 CKR 8847, prosecution, present opening." Morrison stood, approached the jury, established eye contact with each member. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about choices, not about pain. We all feel pain, not about injustice. We all face injustice, but about the choices we make when pain and injustice strike us." He described Jason Pierce, brilliant engineer, ethical, courageous for reporting flaws that could kill patients, unjustly fired, resulting suicide, genuine tragedy. Amanda Pierce loved her brother, was devastated by the loss. That's understandable, even expected. But then, dramatic pause, she chose to transform pain into a weapon, chose to murder 7 completely innocent people to test poison, chose to plan a massacre of 150 more. He pointed at Amanda. "She's a doctor. Her oath is to do no harm. But she caused maximum imaginable harm, and she did it methodically, scientifically, without remorse, until captured." Morrison presented evidence meticulously over 3 weeks. Amanda's digital diary read aloud. Jury visibly disturbed. Photos of victims projected on a large screen. Testimonies from family members. Devastating forensic analysis of cyanide vials. Security footage showing Amanda entering victims' rooms. The most impactful witness, Grace Thompson, day 18 of the trial, Tuesday 2:30 p.m. Grace climbed to the witness stand wearing a light pink dress, hair in braids, holding her stuffed rabbit. The judge had permitted it as a comfort object. An officer had her swear to tell the truth. Grace placed her hand on a children's Bible, voice firm. "I swear." Morrison approached gently. "Grace, can you tell us about the last time you saw your father alive?" And she told. She described Daniel Thompson in room 412, so strong in memories, but fragile and confused in the hospital bed, machines beeping, him trying to smile at her despite pain, saying she was his little grace, his gift. "And did you smell anything different in the room?" Morrison asked. "The smell, sweet like almonds, but wrong, very wrong." "What did you do?" "I warned the nurses, warned the doctors, warned everyone." Voice began trembling, but she continued. "But nobody listened. They said I was too young, that I was imagining." "And was there someone specific taking care of your father?" Grace looked directly at Amanda for the first time. "Her, the woman with red glasses. She was always there, messing with my dad's medicines." Morrison showed an enlarged photo of Amanda with red glasses. "Is this the person?" "Yes, without doubt, without any doubt. I'll never forget her face." "How did she make you feel when you tried to warn about the smell?" Grace closed her eyes. "Remembering, like I didn't exist, like my words weren't worth anything because I was small, like I didn't matter." Absolute silence in the courtroom. Morrison thanked her, sat. Delgado stood for cross-examination, knew she needed to be careful. Jury sympathized with the child. "Grace, you're very brave for being here. I just have a few questions." "Okay. You were 6 years old when your father passed away, correct?" "Yes. And memories from when we're very young can sometimes get confused." "Can't they?" "Objection." Morrison stood, intimidating the witness. "I'll rephrase, Grace. Are you absolutely certain it was Dr. Pierce you saw, and not someone else with similar glasses?" Grace looked at Delgado with eyes too old for 8. "I'm certain, because after my dad died, I drew her face every day for 6 months, drew so I wouldn't forget, because I knew someday someone would finally listen to me." There was no answer for that. Delgado tried a few more angles, but Grace remained consistent, clear, unshakable. Other testimonies followed, families of the other 6 victims, each story breaking hearts, Hart describing the investigation. Reynolds admitting systemic medical failure, Caldwell, in wheelchair, detailing Jason's unjust firing. The defense tried a temporary insanity strategy. A psychiatrist testified Amanda suffered complex P-test from her brother's loss. Dissociation, major depression, argued she wasn't in a sound mental state when she committed the crimes, but when Amanda testified in her own defense, everything collapsed. Delgado guided her through Jason's story. "The suicide, subsequent pain," Amanda cried, described nightmares, isolation, growing obsession. The jury seemed sympathetic. Then Morrison stood for cross-examination. "Dr. Pierce, you planned these murders over 8 months, correct?" "Yes, but..." "Maintained a normal job, interacted professionally with colleagues, showed no signs of insanity at work." "I was hiding." "So you were sane enough to hide, kept a meticulous diary documenting each test, scientifically analyzing results." "Yes, that requires an organized, functional mind capable of complex planning, not an insane mind." Amanda didn't respond. "And the victims, Daniel Thompson, Maria Rodriguez, others, did they have anything to do with your brother's death?" "No." "Then why kill them?" Long silence. Then Amanda whispered, "I needed to know the right dosage, couldn't make a mistake with Caldwell. So you saw them as what? Experiments. A tear fell. "I didn't think of them as people, just thought of the end goal." Morrison approached. "Dr. Pierce, answer directly. Did you think of them as people when you were killing them?" Amanda closed her eyes. The whole room held its breath. Finally, "No, I didn't, and that's unforgivable." The admission destroyed the insanity defense. A genuinely insane person doesn't have the insight to recognize the unforgivability of their actions. Delgado tried to recover, but the damage was done. Closing arguments, Morrison appealed to justice. Delgado to compassion. The jury retired to deliberate. 3 hours later, they returned, guilty on all counts. Sentence: 7 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole for a minimum of 175 years. plus 25 additional years for attempted murder and terrorism. When the judge banged the gavel, Amanda didn't react, just sat there, eyes empty. Officers approached to escort her. But before leaving, she turned her head, searching for Grace among the crowds in the courtroom. Their eyes met, the woman who'd killed her father and the girl who'd prevented more deaths. Amanda moved her lips silently. "I'm sorry." Grace didn't respond, didn't wave, didn't forgive, just watched as Amanda Pierce was taken away to spend the rest of her life behind bars, paying for choices that could never be undone. Helena leaned in, whispered, "Are you okay?" Grace thought. Then honestly, "I don't know. She'll be in prison forever, but my dad's still dead, so was justice done? I don't know." It was a wiser answer than many adults could articulate. Justice is imperfect, doesn't bring the dead back, doesn't undo trauma, just ensures the person who caused harm doesn't cause more. It's something, but it's never enough. 6 months after the trial, March spring, beginning to color the city's trees, the main auditorium of Central Mercy Hospital was decorated with blue and white banners, the newly created Caldwell-Thompson Foundation logo projected on a giant screen behind the stage, a design showing a child and adult at the same height, listening to each other. Intentional symbolism. 500 people filled the seats. Doctors, nurses, hospital administrators, medical educators, medical students, representatives from hospitals in 12 states. Media in the press area at the back, cameras broadcasting live to medical schools across the country. It was the official inauguration of the foundation and launch of the national training program, Voices That Save Lives. Backstage, Grace, now 8.5, height past 4 feet, lost 2 front baby teeth giving an adorably imperfect smile, was nervous, sweaty palms, racing heart, new blue dress. This one actually bought new. A gift from Caldwell, but Grace chose a simple style because "I don't want to look like a princess, I want to look like me." Helena adjusted the clip in her daughter's hair. "You're going to be amazing." "What if I forget what to say? Then you speak from the heart." "Like you always do." Camilla appeared bringing water. 5 minutes, Grace. You ready?" Grace took a deep breath, practiced the grounding technique Dr. Sarah had taught her, touched 5 things: fabric of the dress, smooth wall, mother's hand, water glass, her own hair, observed 4 things: lights, people, chairs, curtain, heard 3 things: murmur of the audience, background music, her own breathing, smelled 2 things: mother's perfume. Air conditioning, tasted 1 thing: fresh water she'd just drunk, scented, ready on stage. Reynolds, now medical director of the foundation, had left his hospital position for full dedication, was finishing his introduction. Reason modern medicine has extraordinary technology, but technology without humanity, without genuine listening, without humility to recognize that wisdom can come from anyone, is empty, is fallible, is dangerous. Pause for effect. A year ago, 20 specialist doctors couldn't save Ethan Caldwell's life. Hundreds of millions of dollars in equipment and AI technology failed. But a 7-year-old child, daughter of a cleaning staff member, with nothing but memory and courage, she succeeded. Applause. This foundation exists because Grace Thompson taught us a fundamental lesson. Medicine isn't just science. It's listening, it's humility, it's recognizing we know less than we think, and that we need to be open to learning from everyone. He introduced Caldwell, who came on stage in a wheelchair, still needed it for long periods. Neurological damage from poisoning left permanent effects. He spoke briefly, acknowledged failures, announced a $50 million donation to the foundation, described programs that would be launched. But the person you really need to hear today isn't me. It's the girl who saved me, the girl who tried to save her father and wasn't heard, the girl whose story will change how medicine is practiced in this country. He looked toward the wings. "Grace, can you come here?" Grace held her mother's hand for one last second, then let go, walked to the stage with small but determined steps. Applause grew. Immediate standing ovation. 500 people on their feet clapping for an 8-year-old girl. She reached the podium. They adjusted the microphone down, looked at the sea of faces, located her mother, second row, already crying, Camilla beside Helena, Reynolds on the side of the stage, smiling encouragingly. Caldwell still on stage, in his wheelchair and front row center seat, an empty chair with a framed photo of Daniel Thompson. Helena had insisted, "Daddy's watching, even if we can't see him." Grace fixed her eyes on her father's photo. Breathing calmed, he would give her strength, she began. "My name is Grace Thompson. When I was 6 years old, my dad got sick, here, in this hospital." Voice amplified through speakers, echoing through the silent auditorium. "Nobody could figure out what was wrong, but I smelled something, a weird smell, sweet, like almonds, but wrong. I warned the nurses, warned the doctors, warned everyone who would listen." Pause. A tear fell, but her voice didn't waver. "Nobody listened to me because I was just a child, and children don't know anything, right?" The rhetorical question hung in the air. "My dad died, and for a long time I thought it was my fault, that if I'd screamed louder, insisted more, fought more, he'd be alive." She looked directly at the cameras now, knowing medical students in dozens of cities were watching. "But my therapist taught me it wasn't my fault. It was the fault of a system that decides who deserves to be heard based on age. Money, power, it was the fault of adults who forgot that children see things they don't see, that children pay attention in different ways." She took a deep breath, went to the heart of the speech. "So, if you're a doctor, nurse, anyone who takes care of sick people, I want you to remember, when a child speaks, listen. Don't pretend you're listening. Don't give them a lollipop and send them away. Really listen, because sometimes we see what you can't see." Her voice broke slightly, but she forced herself to continue. "My dad's name was Daniel Thompson. He was a night security guard here. He made animal shadows on walls to make children laugh. Always said I was his grace, God's gift." She looked at the photo in the front row, spoke directly to it. "I couldn't save you, Daddy, but I saved Mr. Caldwell, and now, with this foundation, maybe we can save other people. Other children won't have to go through what I went through. Other fathers won't die because nobody wanted to listen to their children." Her voice fell to a whisper. The microphone still captured. "Daddy, I hope you're proud. I tried to do what you always taught me. Never give up, even when it's hard. Always speak the truth, even when nobody wants to hear. And always, always take care of people who need help." The last sentence came out so low it was almost inaudible. "I love you, and I promise I'll keep making you proud." She stepped away from the microphone. Absolute silence for 3 seconds. That heavy silence when something profound has been shared and nobody knows how to respond adequately. Then one person began to applaud, then another and another. And within seconds, 500 people were on their feet, applauding with force that made the walls tremble. Tears streaming down the faces of hardened medical professionals who finally understood the lesson this small, brave child was trying to teach. Grace didn't smile, just nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and returned to her seat beside her mother. Helena enveloped her in a crushing embrace, whispering in her ear, "Your father's watching, my love, and he's bursting with pride as much as I am." 3 years passed. Grace, 11 years old, visited Central Mercy Hospital regularly. Not as a staff member's daughter, but as child health advocate. She'd already spoken at 18 medical schools, 12 medical conferences, countless hospital training sessions. The Caldwell Thompson Foundation had trained 8,400 healthcare professionals in 23 states. The Daniel Thompson Scholarship had funded 127 students. Protocols based on the case had become standard in 340 hospitals. Helena was promoted to cleaning supervisor with a salary that allowed a better apartment. Private school for Grace with partial scholarship, more stable life, but success didn't erase pain. Grace still had occasional nightmares, still visited her father's grave every month, still carried longing that would never completely disappear. Healing isn't linear, isn't complete, but it's possible. 20 years later, Dr. Grace Thompson, 28, graduated from medical school, Johns Hopkins, full scholarship, specialized in pediatrics and toxicology, was in her own office when she received a call. Caldwell was in the hospital, terminal condition, asking to see her. She went, held his hand, while the man she'd saved 20 years ago died peacefully, surrounded by the legacy he'd managed to build in the 2 decades since the poisoning. His last words, "Thank you for giving me the chance to fix things. I hope Jason and your father, wherever they are, can eventually forgive." Grace squeezed his hand. "You did more than fix things. You changed an entire system. That matters." He closed his eyes for the last time, a small smile on his face. Caldwell's funeral 3 days later, Grace was invited to speak once again before a crowd, but this time she spoke as an adult, as a doctor, as a woman who'd transformed childhood tragedy into life mission. She honored Caldwell honestly, acknowledged mistakes but also genuine transformation, ended with, "Redemption doesn't erase the past, but choosing a different future. That's courage," and Mr. Caldwell had that courage. 30 years after the poisoning, Grace Thompson, now 57, graying hair, eyes still bright with that characteristic attentiveness, stood at her father's grave holding a copy of her youngest son's doctorate thesis, newly graduated in medical toxicology, with a dedication on the first page, "To my grandfather Daniel Thompson, whom I never met, but who lives in every lesson of courage, kindness, and integrity my mother taught me." Grace placed the document against the headstone. "Your grandson followed in your footsteps, Dad, not as security, but as a protector in another way. He'll save lives like you saved lives, even when nobody noticed." The wind blew gently, making nearby tree leaves dance. "I did what I promised, made you proud, turned your death into something that means something, and now I think I can finally rest a little. Know I've done enough." She touched the cold stone. Closing her eyes, "I love you, Dad, always will, and thank you for teaching me that even the smallest voices can change the world, if the right people are willing to listen." When she opened her eyes, a movement nearby caught her attention. A small girl, maybe 7, sat alone on a nearby bench, swinging her legs, holding a worn teddy bear. Something in the child's posture, alone but alert, observing everything, reminded Grace of herself all those years ago. She approached gently. "Hi, are you okay?" The girl looked up, wide brown eyes. "I'm waiting for my mum. She's visiting my grandma." The girl pointed to a headstone a few meters away. "That's kind of you, keeping her company." "I don't mind. I like it here. It's quiet, and people listen better when it's quiet." Grace smiled. "That's very wise. What's your name?" "Maria, and you?" "Grace." "Pretty name. What does it mean?" "It means second chances, transformation, finding beauty even after pain." Maria thought about that. "That's a name with a big story, then." "It is," Grace agreed. "And you know, Maria, I have a feeling you have a big story waiting to happen too." The girl smiled shyly, hugging her teddy bear. At that moment, her mother returned, thanked Grace for the conversation, and took Maria away. But Grace stood there for a long moment watching them go. Another child, observant, attentive, waiting for someone to listen. The world was full of them. And now, finally, there were systems, foundations, protocols, trained people, dedicated to ensuring their voices would be heard. Daniel Thompson had died invisible, but his daughter ensured he lived on in every child whose life was saved because an adult finally stopped to listen. That was the legacy. Not perfect, not without pain, but real and lasting, and exactly what a small girl, once ignored, had always dreamed of creating. A world where no child would have to scream to be heard, where every voice mattered, where paying attention, really paying attention, was recognized not as weakness or waste of time, but as the most important skill any healer could have. Grace walked back to her car, heart lighter than it had been in decades, and as she drove home, where her family waited for Sunday dinner, she whispered the words that had become her mantra. When a child speaks, listen. Simple, powerful, and capable of saving the world. one small voice at a time. Did Grace's story remind you of a time when you felt unheard? What would you have done in her place if you could create one change in how hospitals treat children's observations? What would it be? Daniel Thompson's memory lived on not through monuments, but through the countless lives saved by a system that finally learned to listen, proving that even the most invisible among us can change the world. If someone brave enough refuses to let their voice be silenced,